It was one of those nights when sleep felt impossibly far away. The kind where you lie still, eyes open, thinking of everything and nothing at once. The clock on the wall had long stopped meaning anything. It was just quiet enough to hear it tick, but too late to care about the time. I slipped on my coat, half out of restlessness and half out of instinct, and stepped outside. The town was silent, wrapped in that heavy calm that only exists after midnight. Streetlights cast little halos on the pavement, and the air carried that faint chill that feels both lonely and peaceful. I walked with no plan, just following the rhythm of my footsteps. The usual cafes were dark, their chairs stacked, their signs flipped to closed. But then, down a narrow street I barely noticed before, there it was, a soft amber light spilling onto the sidewalk. The window was fogged slightly, and through it I could see movement. Someone sweeping, something baking, the kind of life that shouldn't exist at this hour. Above the door hung a wooden sign, simple and unassuming, "The Midnight Bakery." I hesitated at the door. It wasn't fear, more like curiosity mixed with the kind of wonder you feel when something doesn't quite fit into the world you know. I pushed it open gently, and the bell above the door gave a small, tired jingle. Warmth wrapped around me instantly. The smell was the first thing I noticed. Butter, cinnamon, and something else, something sweet and unfamiliar. Behind the counter stood an old man with kind eyes and sleeves dusted with flour. He looked up, smiled, and said, "Couldn't sleep either?" I laughed softly. "You could say that." He nodded as if he understood more than I said. "Happens to everyone eventually. Tea?" Before I could answer, he was already pouring. The sound of the kettle was comforting, steady, like rain on a roof. He slid a cup toward me, along with a small plate holding a warm pastry. He said, "Try this. It helps." I took a bite, and it was unlike anything I'd tasted before. Light, soft, and slightly sweet, like something you dream about and forget the moment you woke. There was only one other person inside, a woman sitting near the window, sketching quietly. The old man hummed a slow tune while cleaning the counter, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Everything felt timeless, like this place existed outside the rules of the night. After a while, the woman closed her sketchbook and stood up. "She only opens when someone needs to talk," she said with a small smile, nodding toward the baker. Then she slipped out into the night. I looked back at the old man, but he didn't seem surprised. He just smiled faintly and said, "Another refill?" I nodded. The tea was soothing, warm in my hands. Outside, the sky was deep blue, not quite night, not yet morning. The quiet felt different now, softer somehow. As I left, the baker waved without a word. The sign above the door swayed gently in the breeze, and for a moment I wondered if the place would still be there tomorrow. That night, I walked home lighter than I'd been in weeks. When I finally lay down, I didn't think about sleep. I just listened to the faint sound of my own breathing, steady and calm until the night faded quietly into dreams. The next few nights passed quietly. I almost convinced myself that the bakery had been a dream. One of those strange, comforting dreams had blur with memory by morning. But on the fourth night, when sleep began to slip away again, I felt the pull, that gentle nudge that said, "Go back." The streets were just as still, the same faint hum of faraway traffic, the same lonely flicker of a streetlight at the corner. And there it was, the midnight bakery, waiting, as if it had never closed. The same amber light, the same bell above the door, half-heartedly ringing as I stepped inside. The old man was there, of course. He was shaping dough with slow, careful movements. Flour floated in the air like soft dust, catching the light. He didn't look up when I entered, just said, "Good evening," in that calm, steady tone, as though he'd been expecting me. This time, there was someone else sitting at the counter. A man in his 60s, maybe older, with a small wooden clock resting in front of him. It was a beautiful thing, delicate and a little worn, like it had stories to tell. The clock wasn't ticking. The stranger noticed me looking. "Stopped last winter," he said, running a finger along its edge. "I've fixed clocks all my life, but this one, it doesn't want to come back." I sat beside him, curious. The baker poured 2 cups of tea without asking and set them down between us. The stranger smiled faintly. "You been here before?" I said. "Once. Didn't think it was real until now." He chuckled softly. "That's how this place is. It finds you when you stop looking for things." We sipped our tea in silence for a while. The air was warm, filled with the faint crackle of the oven. The stranger spoke again, almost to himself. "When my wife passed, the ticking in our house was unbearable. Every second too loud. I started leaving clocks unwound, one by one. Then one day I missed the sound. Isn't that strange?" His words hung there, not heavy, just honest. The baker slid a tray from the oven, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air, softening the moment. "What about that one?" I asked, nodding to the wooden clock. He smiled a little. "Oh, this one's different. She gave it to me when we first met, said it would keep us in sync no matter where life took us." He turned the key slowly, and the clock gave a faint click, then silence again. "I keep bringing it here. Maybe one night it'll decide to start ticking." The old man leaned over from behind the counter. "Maybe it already has," he said quietly. We both looked at him, and before I could ask what he meant, the stranger tapped his watch and laughed under his breath. "Maybe." The old man brought us slices of cake, light and sweet, with just a hint of lemon. He said, "For new company," before disappearing into the back room. When I finally stepped outside, the night felt different. The air was cooler, but not cold. The kind of night that stays with you, calm, steady, and familiar. I thought about the stranger and his quiet patience, how he kept returning to something that refused to work, not out of frustration, but care. By the time I reached home, I could almost hear the faint sound of ticking, slow, steady, gentle, as if somewhere the clock had finally begun. It was raining the next time I returned. Not a heavy rain, just the kind that drizzles quietly, soft enough to turn streetlights into halos. The world looked half asleep, wrapped in silver mist, and I felt that familiar calm as I walked toward the little corner where the midnight bakery always waited. Through the fogged-up window, I saw the same warm light glowing inside. The bell above the door gave its small, familiar chime as I stepped in. The smell was a little different that night, something with honey and orange peel. The old baker gave a knowing smile. "You always arrive when the weather gets thoughtful," he said, setting a teapot down. There was someone new sitting by the window. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, with hair tucked under a wool hat and the notebook open in front of her. Tiny scraps of paper were spread across the table, some torn, some folded, some covered in faint pencil sketches. When I sat nearby, she looked up and smiled. "Don't mind the mess. I'm sorting dreams." I laughed softly, unsure if she was joking. "Dreams?" "Mm-hmm," she said, flipping one of the papers. "People leave them behind. I just collect them before they disappear." On the paper was a drawing of a field under moonlight, with small figures sleeping beside lanterns. Another had a few words scrawled in looping handwriting. "A place where no one forgets your name." The baker poured me a cup of tea, chamomile this time, and placed a small tart beside it. "She's been coming here for months," he said gently. "Dreams need good company." The girl smiled, brushing crumbs off her sleeve. "I think everyone has a few dreams they forget to keep. I just write them down when they wander in." I watched her pick up a scrap, glance at it like she was reading a secret, then tuck it carefully into a little wooden box. "What do you do with them after?" I asked. "Nothing," she said. "They're not mine to change. I just hold on until they find their way back." Outside, the rain deepened, pattering softly against the windows. Inside, the bakery felt warmer, quieter, like time itself was taking a breath. After a while, she slid one of the papers across the table toward me. "Here," she said. "This one hasn't found its person yet." I unfolded it carefully. It was simple, a sketch of a lantern on a table surrounded by shadows. Below it were 3 small words: "Still burning softly." I stared at it for a long time, though I wasn't sure why. Something about it felt familiar, like a memory I'd misplaced. She leaned back, sipping her tea. "See? That's how it happens. Sometimes the dream finds you." The baker chuckled softly behind the counter. "Seems the bakery's working again tonight." We stayed there until the rain faded to a mist. When I finally left, I kept the little drawing tucked safely in my pocket. The streets were slick with reflections, lamps, puddles, the faint shimmer of dawn trying to break through. As I walked home, the words echoed gently in my mind, "Still burning softly." For the first time in a long while, I felt something steady glowing inside me too. By the time the next week came around, I'd started thinking of the bakery as something between a secret and a promise. I never planned my visits. They just happened on the nights when my mind refused to quiet down. That evening, the sky was pale and restless, scattered with low clouds. The air smelled faintly of rain again, though it hadn't fallen yet. When I reached the corner, the midnight bakery glowed like it always did. Soft light through misty glass, the faint hum of something baking inside. The moment I stepped in, the warmth wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. The baker looked up from behind the counter and nodded. "Ah, there you are. I just put the kettle on." There was a new guest that night, an older woman with silver hair tied in a loose bun. She sat at the back table, carefully folding an envelope. A stack of letters lay beside her, each one sealed, but without a name. She looked up and smiled. "Do you mind sharing a table, do you?" I shook my head and sat across from her. The baker brought over 2 cups of tea and a plate of butter biscuits. "He writes letters that don't need to be sent," he said, then returned to his dough. The woman chuckled softly. "That's one way to put it. I write to people I've never met, just to say the things I never got to say to the ones I have." I picked up one of the letters. It was written in neat, looping handwriting on cream paper. No address, no name, just a single line visible through the envelope flap. "If you ever wonder whether you were loved, you were." I felt something shift quietly inside me. "Do you ever think they reach someone?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. "I think words have their own kind of gravity. They find where they need to go." For a while, we just sat in silence, listening to the faint hiss of steam from the kettle. She began folding another letter, humming to herself. I watched the small pile grow, each envelope sealed gently, as if she were sending kindness into the world, even if no one would see it. After some time, she slid one of them across the table toward me. "Would you keep this one for a while?" The envelope was blank, light in my hand. I hesitated, then tucked it into my coat pocket. "What's inside?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe something you'll need later, or maybe nothing at all." The baker brought over 2 fresh pastries, flaky and warm, the kind that melt as soon as they touch your tongue. The woman thanked him, her voice soft and steady. "You always know when to bring the right thing." He smiled without looking up, only because people never change what they truly need. The woman left soon after, her stack of letters neatly tied with a red ribbon. The bell above the door gave a gentle ring as she disappeared into the night. When I finally stood to leave, the baker handed me another envelope. "She leaves one for everyone," he said, "but they're only meant to be opened when the world feels too quiet." Outside, the wind had picked up. The clouds were breaking apart, letting bits of starlight through. As I walked home, I kept a hand in my pocket, fingers brushing against the smooth paper. I didn't open it that night. I just kept it close, the way you might keep a small promise, not for what's written inside, but for what it reminds you to feel. It had been a few days since I last visited, but that night the air carried a strange stillness, the kind that feels like something waiting to happen. The town seemed quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that presses gently against your ears. As I turned the corner, I noticed something different. The window of the midnight bakery was dimmer than usual. The soft amber glow that usually spilled onto the sidewalk had faded to a flicker. The sign above the door still swayed in the wind, but the light inside seemed tired. When I stepped in, the bell made a dull sound, and I realized several lanterns that usually hung from the ceiling had gone dark. The baker was kneeling by one of them, trying to adjust the wick. His flour-dusted hands moved carefully, but even his calm face showed a hint of concern. "Storm last night," he said, glancing up at me. "Knocked out a few of them. They'll come back eventually." The room felt different without their glow. Shadows lingered in the corners, and the warmth that usually wrapped around me had cooled a little. Yet the smell of something baking, vanilla, maybe with a bit of cardamom, softened the edges of the dimness. At the counter sat the man with the clock. He smiled when he saw me, tapping the pocket of his coat. "It's ticking again," he said, almost proudly. "You were right. I just had to keep listening." And by the window, the girl who collected dreams was sorting her papers by candlelight. A few of them had curled from the heat, their pencil sketches faint but still visible. She looked up and waved. I thought maybe the bakery was sleeping tonight. The baker straightened up, wiping his hands on his apron. "Not sleeping," he said softly, "just catching its breath." He handed me a small lantern, one of the unlit ones, and a box of matches. "Would you do the honors?" I hesitated but struck a match. The tiny flame sparked to life, trembling for a moment before steadying. I touched it to the wick, and the lantern slowly filled with light. The glow spread across the nearby wall, soft and gold, as if the bakery was waking up again. The others followed. The stranger with the clock lit one near the door. The dream collector lit another above the counter. Each time a new lantern flickered to life, the air grew warmer, softer. When the last one was lit, the baker sighed contentedly. "There," he said, "every night deserves its light." We all sat quietly for a while, sipping tea and listening to the gentle creak of the old floorboards. Outside, the rain began again, light, rhythmic, patient. The girl took one of her sketches and pinned it to the wall near the window. It was of a bakery glowing under a rainy sky, its light spreading across the street. "Just so we don't forget what it looks like," she said with a grin. The man with the clock nodded. "Some things are worth remembering even when they fade." The baker leaned on the counter, his eyes warm but distant. "Light always finds a way back. It's people who forget to notice when it does." When I finally left that night, the bakery shone brighter than ever. Every lantern glowed steady and golden, and the rain looked silver in its light. I walked slowly home, the smell of vanilla still following me through the mist. As I turned the last corner, I thought about the old man's words, about light finding its way back, and realized he wasn't just talking about the lanterns. The next few days passed quietly.
almost too quietly. I hadn't planned on returning to the bakery so soon, but that familiar pull came again, soft and certain, like the way you just know when someone is thinking of you. The streets were clear that night. No rain, no mist, only the pale glow of the moon brushing against the rooftops. I walked the same path I always did, the one that led me to that corner where the bakery waited. But when I turned it, it wasn't there. The corner was empty. The warm light that usually spilled onto the pavement was gone. The window, the wooden sign, the quiet hum of the ovens, all gone. In their place was a dark storefront with dusty glass and a "For Lease" sign hanging crookedly in the window. I froze. For a long time I just stood there staring at the empty space. The air felt colder somehow, thinner, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, it just lingers. I checked the street name, the alley, even the lamppost where the light always hit just right. Everything was where it should be, except the bakery. A thought crossed my mind. Maybe it had never really been there. Maybe it only appeared when someone needed it. But if that were true, where did everyone else go? The man with the clock, the girl with her dreams, the woman and her letters. Did they vanish too? I walked closer to the window. Through the dust, I could still make out faint outlines on the floor, the shapes of tables maybe, or where the counter used to be. Something caught the moonlight, and when I crouched to look, I saw a small piece of paper stuck under the door. I pulled it free. The handwriting was neat, looping, familiar. It read, "When the light disappears, it doesn't mean it's gone. It just moved where you needed it next." No name, no signature. But I knew who had written it. I stood there for a long time, holding that note in the pale light, feeling both a little sad and strangely calm. Because deep down, I understood. The bakery had never been about a place. It was a moment, a feeling, a kind of warmth that shows up when the world grows too heavy. I walked home slowly, passing the quiet houses and shuttered shops, the letter tucked safely in my coat pocket beside the one the woman had given me. The two papers felt the same, light, fragile, but somehow alive. That night, when I reached my kitchen, I lit a single candle and placed it by the window. Its flame flickered softly the way those lanterns used to. And as I sat there with my tea, the faintest scent of vanilla drifted through the air. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe, just maybe, the bakery was still there, somewhere, quietly open for someone else who couldn't sleep. I smiled, took a slow breath, and whispered to the quiet room, "Good night, old friend." The flame steadied. The air felt warm again, and for the first time in a long while, I fell asleep before the tea went cold.
The next night, the bakery felt colder. The chairs were still there. The clock still ticked softly. But something in the air had changed, like a room after someone leaves for good. The old man wasn't behind the counter. Instead, a small wooden box sat where he usually stood, covered with a folded napkin and a note written in neat looping letters. For those who stayed long enough to find what they were missing. Inside was an old Polaroid camera and a single photograph. It showed all of us, the regulars, sitting around the little round tables, smiling. The strange part was that none of us remembered ever taking that picture. And in the background, barely visible through the soft glow of the bakery lights, the old man stood watching us, his smile faint but certain. One by one, we took turns staring at the photo. No one spoke. There was a quiet understanding among us, the kind that doesn't need words. Some things weren't meant to be explained. That night, we stayed until dawn. The bread was gone, the tea had cooled, but the air felt full, like every unspoken word had finally found a place to rest. When we stepped outside, the sun was rising, washing the streets in pale gold. I looked back, half expecting to see the bakery fading away like a dream. But it was still there, just quieter, still, waiting. And maybe it always would be, for the next sleepless soul who needed it.
Weeks passed, and life found its usual rhythm again. Work, errands, the small routines that make up ordinary days. But some nights, I'd still wake before dawn, reach for my coat, and walk to the corner where the bakery stood. Only now, it wasn't there. The building was dark, the windows empty. The sign that once read, "Open," had vanished, as if it had never existed. I waited anyway, just in case. The air still carried that faint, sweet scent of baked bread, the kind that lingers when a memory refuses to fade. A few of the others came by too. We'd nod, share a quiet smile, and stand there together for a while. No one said much. We didn't have to. Something about that place had changed us, made the night softer, the silence less lonely. One morning, just before leaving, I noticed a single chair sitting near the spot where the bakery door used to be. It wasn't old or new, just simple, wooden, familiar. Someone had carved a small word into the backrest. Rest. So I did. I sat, closed my eyes, and listened. For a moment, I could almost hear it again. The soft hum of the oven, the clink of cups, and the old man's quiet voice asking, "Couldn't sleep again, huh?" When I opened my eyes, the street was empty, but I didn't feel alone anymore. Maybe the bakery wasn't gone, maybe it had just moved, waiting for the next person who couldn't sleep, who needed warmth, tea, and a gentle reminder that even the quietest nights have company. And with that thought, I finally slept easily again.